the backyard lab that sparked a neighborhood war. It was just past midnight when the flashing lights flooded my cul-de-sac, turning the quiet suburban street into a scene from a crime drama. My golden retriever, Max, barked furiously as I stumbled out in my flannel pajamas, clutching a portable spectrometer and a chipped mug that read, "Science never sleeps." Across the hedge, my neighbor Linda stood in a bright pink tracksuit, yelling into her phone, "I've got a mad scientist in my neighborhood." She pointed at my backyard lab setup like she'd just uncovered a terrorist plot. I should have known trouble was brewing when I caught her squinting through her blinds at 3 a.m., muttering about suspicious lights. Within 15 minutes, police cruisers, a fire truck, and a hazmat vent screeched to a halt. Linda, triumphant, high-fived a baffled paramedic and shouted, "I stopped a drug lab." She had no clue I was an FDA field investigator on a federal case, and her 911 call was about to unravel a critical investigation. The night had started calmly. I was calibrating my gas chromatography unit, testing soil samples for bacterial contamination linked to a foodborne outbreak at local schools. My backyard lab, complete with cooling coils, blinking LEDs, and a faint hum from the generator, was a high-tech fortress, secured with biometric locks and privacy fencing. To an outsider, it might have looked odd, but to me, it was just another Tuesday. Linda, however, saw a Breaking Bad setup. Without asking a single question, she dialed 911, her voice booming through a megaphone she inexplicably owned. "He's cooking something dangerous." As police swarmed my yard, I stayed calm, setting my spectrometer down and raising my hands. I flashed my FDA badge, but the rookie cops hesitated. Linda, now in a headlamp and slippers, pointed at me like I was public enemy number one. "He mentioned bacteria," she shrieked to a neighbor. "That's code for drugs, right?" Her husband, Tom, stood behind her, eating a PB&J and shaking his head, clearly used to her theatrics. Tension spiked when an officer reached for my sealed cooler. "That's under quarantine protocol," I warned. "Opening it risks the samples." He froze, glancing at the box, then backed off. Linda wasn't having it. "He's lying. I saw him pour chemicals." "I heard bubbling," she yelled, then whispered to an onlooker, "Maybe it's that face-eating drug from the news." The hazmat team read my equipment labels, GCMS, liquid chromatography, and confirmed it wasn't a drug lab. After a quick call to the FDA's regional office, my credentials checked out. The SWAT officer holstered his rifle, muttering, "Well, that's a new one." Linda, undeterred, crossed her arms. "You're saying he can run a secret lab in his backyard? What about my roses? What about air quality?" The lead officer sighed. "Ma'am, he's a federal investigator testing for foodborne illnesses. He's following protocol. That should have ended it." Instead, Linda stomped off, muttering, "I bet the badge is fake." By dawn, I was furious but focused. My samples were at risk, and the testing window was shrinking. Linda had tipped off a local news crew, who filmed her dramatic retelling of saving the neighborhood. The clip went viral, captioned, "Linda calls cops on FDA agent. Thinks she's a hero." Meanwhile, I found a letter under my door, not an apology, but a typed neighborhood safety concern from Linda, claiming my lab's lights and smells caused her emotional distress. Attached was a grainy photo of me with a test tube, circled in red like a conspiracy theorist's evidence board. I sipped my coffee, wondering if this quiet suburb had always been a powder keg or if I'd just moved next to its self-appointed sheriff. Linda wasn't done. She escalated, rallying the HOA with emails about chemical hazards. Her tone was formal, but it was all her demanding I halt my non-domestic operations until her compliance committee, her, Tom, and a Wi-Fi-fearing retiree named Barbara, investigated. I replied politely, attaching my federal authorization and citing state exemptions for residential labs. She retaliated by posting my email on the community board, scrawling "not HOA approved" in red. Then, my motion sensor pinged. Camera footage showed Linda sneaking into my side yard, gloved hand fumbling with my shed's latch, a plastic bag in the other. When the sensor's voice blared, "Unauthorized entry detected," she dropped the bag and bolted, tripping over her own feet. I filed a report with the FDA and sent her a cease and desist letter, which she tore up and left on my porch, weighted with a rock labeled "troublemaker." Then, a breakthrough. My water samples showed E. coli and coliform bacteria spikes near the neighborhood's drainage ditch. The contamination pattern matched outbreaks in other districts, tied to faulty compost or irrigation. I recalled Linda's backyard compost pit overflowing with pet waste and expired food, perched on a slope feeding the runoff. The irony was rich. The woman accusing me of endangering the community might be its biggest health hazard. I adjusted my sampling to map the runoff downstream from her yard. The results were damning bacterial spikes traced directly to her property. Linda doubled down, distributing flyers titled Toxic Science Next Door and hosting an HOA safety walkthrough to expose my lab. Only 5 neighbors showed up, 2 for the free iced tea. She pointed at my shed like it was a missile silo, but her influence was slipping. A neighbor, Frank, handed back her flyer, saying, "Linda, the only toxin here is your attitude." Undeterred, she called an emergency HOA meeting, projecting blurry photos of me with ominous music. I attended, FDA patch on my jacket, and presented my data, bacterial counts, runoff maps, and a link to the school outbreaks. The room turned. A nurse asked if this was tied to her son's illness. I nodded. Another neighbor edged away from Linda, who ranted about fake data. Her husband sighed, rubbing his temples. The next day, a city inspector arrived not for me, but for Linda's compost pit, flagged for illegal waste disposal. She tried to charm him, apron emblazoned with Green Living Guru, but he wasn't buying it. He took samples, noting the runoff's path. That evening, Barbara from the HOA left a voicemail, apologizing for Linda's overreach and asking me to host a safety seminar. I agreed, seeing a chance to shift the narrative. At the seminar, I demoed bacteria tests on drainage water near Linda's yard. The contaminant meter flashed red. The crowd gasped. Linda, watching from her hedges with binoculars, didn't show. My final samples confirmed it. Linda's compost was ground zero. Using non-toxic dye markers, I traced the runoff from her yard to the drainage system. At 3 a.m., my camera caught her frantically shoveling soil and dumping containers into trash bags, trying to erase evidence. I sent the footage to the FDA and the county health department. By noon, officials arrived. Linda, watering her roses with feigned calm, panicked as they presented the video. Citations piled up: illegal waste disposal, runoff violations, improper fertilizer use. She refused a soil test release, insisting she was just gardening. The officer noted that too. Linda's last stand was a protest, waving a sign. "I'm being targeted." Neighbors filmed her rants, one clip going viral with her dog peeing on her sign. The HOA voted 18-2 to oust her from leadership. She stormed out, vowing lawsuits, but her credibility was gone. The neighborhood relaxed. Kids nicknamed me Science Guy, and my lab became a weekend science corner, with a local teacher taking over post-assignment. On my final day, a national news crew arrived, tipped off by Linda about FDA overreach. I showed them my data, unedited footage, and her trespassing clip. The reporters sighed, admitting Linda had called relentlessly. The aired story praised my work, with a shot of Linda yelling at the crew to leave the Patriots alone. Memes exploded, one captioning her megaphone rants, "Linda versus Science, the volcano conspiracy." As I packed my gear, a note appeared on my door, in Sharpie. "You won the neighbors, but I'm watching. This is our street." What do you think about Linda's actions and the neighborhood's response? Was this just a misunderstanding or a deeper issue of mistrust and control? Share your thoughts below, especially on how fear and misinformation can spark conflict. Let's hear your take.